What's up, everybody, and welcome to episode 121 of Bettin N Boozin here on the HHH Racing Podcast. I'm your host, Kyle Roscoe, and what a fun one we have for you guys tonight as we cover Gotham Stakes Day at Aqueduct and their mid-level derby prep. It's going to be an absolutely fantastic card to cover and hopefully an even better show. Welcome in, everybody. Thank you guys all so much for joining us. We greatly appreciate it. If you guys enjoy the content or you find yourself coming back on the regular and you aren't subscribed yet, why not? You're already coming back anyway. Please go down below the video player, hit the like button, and hit the subscribe button. Again, we would greatly appreciate it because not only does it show us that you guys are enjoying the content, but also it pushes this podcast and others of ours out into the YouTube algorithm to hopefully bring like-minded horse players like yourself to the HHH Racing Podcast. And of course, for that, we thank you guys. We'll get started here in just a second, but of course, as you see scrolling at the bottom side of the screen, our normal podcast schedule, every intermittent Mondays at 8 p.m. Eastern, we have our recap show, Horsin Around. On Tuesdays at 9:30 p.m. Eastern, we have Pacific Horseplayers with Noah and Ryan covering various West Coast racing subjects. Wednesday is usually our time at 8 p.m. Eastern, but you guys noticed we have the special time. We are prime time on Thursday night, which is normally reserved for picks and ponies. However, they went yesterday night covering Fountain of Youth Stakes Day. So if you guys haven't checked that out yet, please, after this podcast, go ahead and go watch that, because if you're betting Aqueduct, you're definitely going to want to be betting Gulfstream as well. Tons of Kentucky Derby preps coming your way. So again, hit that subscribe button and the notification bell so you guys don't miss any new podcasts arising. Of course, every podcast is also posted in audio form. Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Anchors, where we post those. So if you're more of an audio listener or just want to listen on your way to the gym, on your way to work, whatever you want to do, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Anchors, where you find those. So please go rate, review, and subscribe over there. Bettin N Boozin Podcast on TikTok and Instagram. I'm posting a lot of short form content over on those two. So if you guys are well inclined, please go give us a follow over there at Bettin N Boozin Podcast. The Power Picks, guys, still going super strong as usual. $2.10 ROI, almost 800 total picks since 4 years ago. And that's an absolutely crazy that this is already 4 years old and it's still doing as well as it did back then. So if you guys are not subscribed, you guys are missing out. Price plays, spot plays, pick 5 grids. And as my internet crashes out on me, my apologies to everybody out there. If you guys are not subscribed, again, 3 different tracks, price plays, spot plays, pick 5 grids, everything you need to be successful on any given Saturday. We here at the HHH Racing Podcast have you covered with the Power Picks. So please, patreon.com/HHH Racing Podcast. The link is also in the description as well for those. And if you want to see previous editions of those Power Picks before you buy them, or just want to learn more about our podcast, HHH Racing Podcast is the place to do so. Got through that obviously a little slip up there, but it's all part of the fun around here is what we like to say. I'll bring on my co-hosts and then we will get right into the chat and then right into the handicapping. Patrick will be here. He's a little bit late. He's on his way home from work. So we won't wait up for him, but of course we'll have his picks on the bottom side of the screen. But the man who's always here is the man who's going to be joining me from the Ohio State University, Charlie Freeman. Charlie, what's going on, my man?
Not much. I kind of actually like that we're on Thursday this week. Just finished wrapping up midterms here at the Ohio State University. No classes Friday, so time to just enjoy the weekend and some horse racing.
I mean, what's better than that? Kentucky Derby horse racing is what prep horse racing, as I should say, is what's better than that. Fantastic week coming up. Obviously, I've already touched on. Katie, of course, is here. I'm ready as well. Katie, thanks so much for joining the show. Greatly appreciate it. Tom is here on time today. Tom, thanks so much for joining the show. Cool hat. I assume you meant to say, Katie. We do have a runner racing today later at Turfway Park. I believe it's race 9, the number 3. Minnesota Money makes her debut at 3, if I'm not mistaken, or 4. They all blend together at this point, but coming off a little bit of a layoff, will run in the 9th race at Turfway Park tonight. So looking forward to cheering her on after the show. My mom is here. Mom, thanks so much for joining. Greatly appreciate it. I've had this hat for probably 5 years, so I don't know where you've been, Mom. But thanks so much for joining. Greatly appreciate it. Ralph Conti, of course, is here, and Terry Frank as well. Colin Quinn as well. Let's hope the half the wet paint is the runt of the family. Colin, obviously, we will talk about it here in a second, man. But thanks so much for joining the show. Greatly appreciate it. Charlie, we're not going to waste anyone's time. We're going to go right into it. We're going to cover the late pick 5 on Gotham Day at Aqueduct. But of course, there is a stakes race outside of the late pick 5, and that is race number 4. It is the Tom Fool. Charlie, we won't go through it at all, but it's a field of 6 with I'll pull up the Equibase just so everyone can see visually what I'm talking about here. You could see the field of 6 going 6 furlongs for 175,000 for olders. The morning line favorite is the number 2 Top Gunner, who I think is going to be pretty tough in that spot. The morning lines are a lot closer than I thought. Charlie, I know you like the 1 running Son of a Gun. Again, we're not really going to talk about it, but if you want, feel free to talk real quick about what you liked more about the 1 than what I presume is going to be a pretty heavy favorite in the 2.
Yeah, I have a feeling this is going to be a 2-horse race between the 2 of them, and it's just going to be a question with them being next to each other. Do they engage in a speed duel, or is someone who's trying to beat the 8-year-old? Shout out Graham's Patrick is not here yet for this being a race for him with the 6 and 8-year-old. But yeah, just hoping that this 1 could maybe sit just off of the 2 and just stay in touch. I just think the question is the reality. I know it's Cox and Franco, but the horse is 8. Other than this 104 that he just popped off, a lot of these other numbers show that he was maybe regressing. So trying to beat the favorite. And then the 1, not, I guess, long shot, quote unquote, but horse I would just look out for is the outside horse Surveillance, who is always game and is one of the only horses in this race that doesn't really want to go. So at the very least, he could pick up the pieces. But even though this is likely the 1 or 2, I think Surveillance is the pricey, if you want to say, horse to look out for the setup.
Yeah, no, look, it's actually a really interesting field of 6, although again, outside the late pick 5, yada yada yada. Obviously, we will not be talking about it, but it's a very interesting race. And if you can catch one that's not the 2 or the 1 for that matter, you're definitely going to get paid. So good luck if you guys are going to play race number 4. Race number 6 is where we're starting, guys, with the Stymie Stakes going a mile on the dirt for olders. Draws a field of 8 with the morning line favorite being number 5. Bank Frenzy for LSU Stables, Manny Franco and Rudy Rodriguez at 2-1. Second choice, the number 8, Coastal Mission, the West Virginia bred for Boca Chica and Runco, and third choice to the inside with the number 3, Yo Daddy, Kendrick Carmouche, Linda Rice. Charlie, we will start here, and I'm very, very glad that everyone on the screen is going with the number 3, Yo Daddy, because Charlie, we're starting off early, my friend. This is not to hint at what I'm going to talk about later, but this right here is my irresponsible wager of the week.
Yeah, well, when we get to best bets later, I'm sure you were happy to look at mine to see that I also have a pretty strong feeling about this horse. I like going with one of the younger ones, to be honest with you. I think Yo Daddy is continuously getting better. And this is no disrespect to the, 5 or 8 who also are solid. And by no means is the 5 old. I mean, obviously, the outside horse is 6 now, so that is starting to get up there. And, the 5 is only 5. But the thing I really keyed on, and I'll let you kind of touch on what Yo Daddy is, I feel like this is one that Linda Rice was really trying to figure out what to do with. And then she really started to figure out what he wants, and it's working. Because, you look through the form and there's some turf, there's some dirt. But you look really since the end of 2024, and she just kind of made a decision that he's just going to start sticking at these mile to mile and 1/8 dirt races. And once she started being fully consistent, he's just gotten better with every single start. And I've also been impressed that he's been able to sit a little bit closer on the lead now and not leave himself with as much work to do. And then not only is going by to win, especially that after last time out, but is winning comfortably. And you're starting to see this horse, for a horse who was, 16-1 way back and did no running, to then switching to dirt and gets hammered down and is continually good. I wonder if this one will end up being 4-1. I feel like won't be, but Carmouche has this one performing really well these last 2 efforts.
I'll tell you what, man, I would love if this horse is 4-1. I don't think we're getting 4-1 either, but man, this would be a fantastic price to get on this horse. Charlie, I feel like this is he's getting really good right now, and I feel like Linda has really nailed what this horse wants to do. You can go back. This horse ran at a mile in the 8th, mile in the 16th, on the turf, on the dirt, 1 turn, 2 turns, trying to figure it out. Then ran at the end of his 3-year-old year, ended up running a 1-turn mile, Didn't run the best, but ran behind Mazmak, who's a very nice runner out there in New York that we've covered on this show before. Then goes twice to a mile and an eighth. Wins one of them, but definitely not his best effort, with diminishing coming into that final eighth. Then comes back next time, diminishes again in that final eighth. Linda Rice puts him at a mile, win by a neck, and then win by 5. Granted, that I will say that win by 5 was only in a 3-horse race, but the difference is between that race and this race, I still think that he's going to get the same exact trip that he got even in the 3-horse race. You could see the number 1 concealed carry is going to be out there according to Timeform US's early pace projection. And if Yo Daddy can sit either right behind the 1 or right off the 1 would be even better, because Aqueduct has been at least the last week. If you guys follow Andy Serling and follow David Aragona on Twitter, they've been talking about it all the time, that the rail has been very good and the horses on the lead have been very good. And if Yo Daddy can get on either one of those terms, or maybe even both, I love the 3 in this spot. Charlie, obviously we'll talk about others in this race, but as I mentioned, Aqueduct's been playing a lot more to speed. And even though Yo Daddy has shown the ability to come from the middle and the back, I assume you want this horse near the lead as well.
Yeah, no, and that's what I was hinting at these last 2 efforts that I liked. I don't mind at all that the last race obviously was a small field, but if you look, I mean, you look at the some of the efforts further in the past, like you look at the efforts in mid 2024 and early 2024, and this was one who was trying to sit 4 or 5 lengths off the lead and then make up distance. But you really look at, like I was saying, all these efforts starting in late 2024 when Linda Rice permanently made him a horse going a mile or a little over a mile on the dirt. And not only did she be consistent with that, but also with how she wants him running. I mean, you look, 4-back was on the lead the whole way and then won. 3-back obviously didn't get the job done, ran against a nice horse in Mama's Gold, but was only 2 lengths off the lead. You look last 2-back when the horse won was, I get 6th, but only less than 2 lengths off the lead again. They were just bunched up. And then last time was a half length off and 1 going away. And I just think, and I'm sure you agree, as long as no matter what the pace is, I feel like with his ability, if he's always within 2 lengths or less turning for home, you got to feel pretty good about your chances.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree with you. And I think his form, honestly, might be a little bit what we call dirtied up, right? Because he's been running in all these different types of races that he doesn't necessarily like to do. You look at his 1-turn races, they're by far his best races. You see 3 for 5 at the mile distance, 4 for 5 in the money. Go back, obviously, if Saratoga mile and 1/8 didn't run bad, then blitzes at a mile, and then you on the turf back to the mile. As I stated before, I just think this is exactly what this horse wants to do and should be willing to do, capitalize off of what looks to be honestly a pretty good field, but probably not the best that you're going to get in a race like this. Number 5, Bank Frenzy, is a horse I have in second. Charlie has in third. You and I actually have the same top 3. We'll talk about Bank Frenzy first, then we will go into the 8. Obviously, having this horse in third, you think this is live, but 2-1, when I saw that, I thought that was a really short price, but he's very talented, and he's 7 for 7 in the top 2 at Aqueduct, so not too many ways to diminish his efforts here.
No, he's got plenty of great efforts, and they certainly fit. I think 2 of my slight concerns, I would say, one is, at least to me personally, I feel like we've kind of seen his best, which by no means is anything to be ashamed of. And I think you would agree, his best can certainly win this race. But I also just feel like his upside is a lot more limited than Yo Daddy's. And the other thing I kind of keyed in on is I think it's a little misleading when you see him seemingly as close forwardly wise as Yo Daddy, that you would think that they would sit similar trips. But then this is why it's important when we talk about the colors to pay attention to, because the reason Timeform shows him so much farther back is you see a lot of blue numbers in the races where he's been sitting closer. So he's been closer naturally because he's been in softer paces. So naturally, I mean, look, the ability's there. He still is only 5. So when I'm saying he's old, it's not like he's crazy old. The distance, 6 of 7 in the money, absolutely could fit. But 2-1 to me is incredibly short. I thought this one would honestly be second or third choice, closer around, where Yo Daddy is at 4-1. And absolutely could win in this race. By no means, as much as we like Yo Daddy, is that horse impossible to beat. And the figures are certainly there. I just think the question is how close he'll be, and if he can deal with the fact that Yo Daddy's likely going to have the jump on him.
But this is the thing that Bank Frenzy has the same exact thing we talked about Yo Daddy with, where he's very, very well suited and runs very well at this 1-turn mile distance. His only bad efforts on the page right now are either going shorter than a mile or going 2 turns. I feel like the mile is exactly what this horse wants to do. Keeps Manny Franco, which is obviously a plus out there in New York, and runs the numbers. The things that I agree with you on are Yo Daddy's going to get the jump on him. So if he can run him down, and there's no taking away from his ability. Bank Frenzy is very, very good, but I don't know if he's 2 times, at least on the morning lines, I don't know if he's 2 times the price better than Yo Daddy, when Yo Daddy can certainly improve again off that last effort. So that's why I went with Yo Daddy. The number 8, Coastal Mission. Charlie, you have in second, I have in third. Source has been very, very good for a long time, running in the top of the top, one turn, 7 furlong mile races, and has been doing it well. Obviously ran the Cigar Mile, didn't run terribly, ran 4th, obviously locked mulligan post time. I thought any of these horses were in this race, you guys would know what they would be. Granted, the Toboggan last time I thought was a little bit disappointing, I guess you can say, in the Toboggan last time, but a little bit shorter than what this horse wants to do, and facing horses that absolutely ran away with it on the front end. Feel like this horse could be well suited here, at least to run in the money.
Yeah, I think what's really interesting in the 3 most likely winners is that they all kind of have a similar way of showing the same strengths and weaknesses, and that you see them mixing it up a little bit, but that when you see that 1 mile, you see their best efforts and figures, and then you see for some of them, where they try these different distances where they stretch out, like you see that mile and 8th race, 4th by 7 lengths, and then try to cut back at 7 furlongs, 4th again, but you see the ultra consistent figures again. I think the question with this one is the figures are naturally a little bit lighter as of late, and he is 6 now compared to the 3 and 5. That being said, I personally am a little more excited about this one even than the 5, because he's going to be another one that's going to be more forward. Now, naturally, I think the 8 will probably be sitting a similar trip to Yo Daddy. I just think Yo Daddy has a better kick at this point, and I trust more at the distance. So that's why I ended up with the 3 on top as my top pick. But this is why I have the 8 in second and the 5 and third. Again, similar to why I like Yo Daddy, I just think Coastal Mission's another one who's going to have the jump on the 5, and I just don't know if Big Frenzy is that much better. I mean, I don't think he's the best horse in the race, but even if he was, I don't think he's that much better to be able to make up that kind of ground, and then knowing that it likely won't be a demanding pace. Now, knowing that we've said all this, of course, somehow, for some reason, they're going to then just fly, and we're just all going to be wrong.
Yeah, I'll see you for the Mush Parade on Saturday. But there's one horse I wanted to bring up as well, because this is a horse I had in there for the longest time, and then put Coastal Mission in instead, because I think Coastal Mission is just a little bit more classy and probably just a better animal. But Worcester and Ralph Conti loves Worcester in this spot. And honestly, Ralph, I can see what you're seeing, because Charlie, you pointed out the blue figures and the red figures denoting slow and fast paces respectively. You can see he's close to the pace when they go pretty slow up front at Laurel, and when they go fast up front, he's farther back. I think he's going to be somewhere mid-pack next to a horse like Bank Frenzy, but he's getting good at the right time. Obviously, this is a previously trained Baffert horse, so Brittany Russell takes over. Doesn't necessarily do well first time off the 1.5 layoff as expected, then comes back and fires 2 absolute big ones. Problem is that I don't know if his best is necessarily going to be better than someone like Yo Daddy or Bank Frenzy at this point. However, Worcester is definitely one that needs to be looked at, and I feel like he might get overlooked. Russells are obviously super good over on the East Coast, and she won't ship somewhere if Brittany Russell doesn't think that they can run. So, Ralph, completely respect your opinion, but unfortunately, I just think the 8 might be a little more classy. That's why I threw him in there instead. Last horse I'll talk about, Charlie, real quick. Number 4, winning on weekends, who Pat has in third. This horse ran an absolute blinder last time at 1.25 miles at Aqueduct. He's definitely not going to be, 1, that loose again, 2, anywhere near the lead like that again. There's many different, this is a completely different animal, but you got to respect to the fact that he absolutely ran off the page last time out. But again, this is a much different race, which is why I didn't include him here. I'm going 3-5-8. Pat's going 3-8-4. Charlie's going 3-8-5 in race number 6 to kick off the late pick 5 at Aqueduct on Saturday. David Ramirez. David, haven't seen your name before, my friend. Thanks so much for joining the show. Greatly appreciate it. David, we got you. We will give you winners. Don't you worry. Just keep on listening. Charlie, the next race we'll cover is race number 7. It's the Busher going 1 mile on for fillies of 3 years old. And I don't know about you, Charlie. I thought this race was pretty tough and one of the tougher races of the sequence. The morning line favorite is all the way to the outside, the number 9, Sharp Smile, Manny Franco, Brad Cox at 3-1. And last time I checked, Manny Franco had 4 wins today. If I saw correctly, he might even have gotten more. I stopped watching halfway through the card. The number 2, Ramify, is your second choice. Javier Castellano and Chad Brown at 7-2. Third choice to the inside, the number 1, Liam in the Dust, Luan Machado and Rudy Brissett at 9-2. Charlie, I'll switch over the picks right now. And I'm glad that you're going with a different horse. Number 1, Liam in the Dust. I don't have that horse anywhere, actually. Neither does Pat. So I'm interested to hear what you liked about her. I went with the number 9, Sharp Smile, although I will completely admit it is not my strongest opinion. Charlie, going to you first. On the inside, Liam in the Dust ran the Demoiselle. Didn't run terribly. Probably not what this horse wants to do. Gets back to that one turn, which is probably what her where she wants to be.
Yeah, this is a very, very challenging race. The reality with a lot of these fillies, and it's not meant to be offensive, it's just the reality is a lot of them don't have special numbers, and the ones who do have some of these really bad performances mixed in that you got to kind of figure out. And yeah, I think Liam in the Dust is kind of being overlooked and interesting. I tried to go back and watch that race that, the 2 Ramify and the 9 Sharp Smile came out of, which is a race that a lot of people are going to key in on. We're running away, ended up winning. And the race, just personally, when I watched it, I mean, I thought with the 9, obviously with the, stumble at the start and the break, was the one who has more upside, which is why I have that one in second. And it's probably the deserved morning line favorite. But I feel like we sometimes talk about in these kinds of races where if there isn't one that kind of wows you, to try to go away from that race and look for a fresh face. And Liam in the Dust is a horse who, ran big on debut, beat Impulse Spy, who went on to, become a pretty nice horse, then narrowly lost to La Cara, who's a really nice horse. Then, they go straight into, a grade 1. Horse took plenty of money and was bet down to 5-1. And I know Liam in the Dust was kind of the trendy pick in that race. That was kind of the wise guy horse that a lot of people were trying to say to watch out for. And then, I mean, quite honestly, just did no running at all. Granted, they also set some pretty serious fractions. Then comes back off that race and runs a second where just Mahima was way too good. And again, Mahima's a really nice horse in her own right. And then, just ran into Mahima again. And I just think for this one, has already run in a grade 1, a grade 2, and a grade 3. I know the figures don't jump out at you to be crazy, but has by far, the biggest resume, I think you could argue, in this field, and has run against the most tough horses, gets the blinkers on as well. She's working forwardly, gets Machado back on as well from the effort 2 back. And I just like that she's a fresh face and she has some efforts that I think would fit the spot. And again, I think she's back at a distance that suits her better.
And I also think, as the ever coined Paul Halloran, the DFS, I think this might have been a little bit of OFS, especially after that Pocahontas. Agreed. They ran her in the Demoiselle, didn't run the best at 1 1/8. Now they realized that she might not want the distance, so now they're turning her back a little bit, and this might be what she needs. And with blinkers on, a little bit of an equipment change. Again, fresh face in this race. Charlie, I do completely agree with you, which is actually why I almost went with the 8 on top in this race like Pat did, but I went with the number 9, Sharp Smile. You mentioned it in the last race. I won't show the replay. We'll have replays coming up later, but ran well in the Busanda, got a little bit of a stumble at a break and rushed up, had to be just sat right off the lead. Granted, did get a good trip, but after that stumble and rush up, didn't really have too much in the tank left going late. However, I still thought that was a sneaky good effort. Got a 76 for her troubles first time out as a 3-year-old. Now comes back in her second effort as a 3-year-old. Hopefully she'll continue to mature, which could in turn upgrade that buyer figure from a 76 to somewhere in the low 80s, which is definitely good enough in a race like this. Again, I said that this is not my strongest pick, although I do like that she's drawn to the outside in this race, and I'll show the time from US Pace Projector as we love to do. You can see another not really too fast pace in this race with the number 1, Liam in the Dust. They project to go to the lead. The number 7 just sitting to the outside of her and Nilo's Rose. With Volleyball Princess, they have the 8. She's fascinating all the way in the back. I don't know if that's going to happen, but they have the 9 sitting, just off in the first flight behind the leaders, which I think is a very, very good spot to be in, especially at this race course right now. But again, not my strongest pick. However, I think Sharp Smile might just have the trip around the track to get it done. The number 8, she's fascinating, is a horse that ran another absolute blinder last time out, winning by 8 1/4, breaking her maiden. Basically gets thrown in the next up, right? Obviously, the next could be an N1X at a mile distance or something like that. However, obviously, Dutrow believes that this horse has some ability, especially off that last effort that was very, very visually impressive. Now comes into this race, it's definitely a complete, no pun intended, it's a completely different animal. But I think if she trips out, she might sit somewhere in mid pack. I think she's going to be in front where Timeform US predicts her. And if she gets that trip around the track, she's definitely good enough, especially if she continues to improve second time out at 3 years old off of that last race. Then again, I'd love to hear from Pat if he comes on later. I think he might have her in his best bets as well. So maybe we'll get to hear from him later why he likes her so much on top. Charlie, last horse we'll talk about is number 2, Ramify. The last race, honestly, probably a little disappointing, although they didn't go too fast up front. She was all the way near the back, probably didn't set up for her at all, but she ran fantastic in her maiden race. Probably scratch that one out, try and run back here, cutting back from 1 1/8 to a mile.
Yeah, and look, obviously the debut was incredible to be, I know they went fast, but still to be 13 lengths off the lead on debut and get there just in time was just a masterful ride from Pratt. It's Castellano aboard, who I'm personally a big fan of. And obviously with, the connections and Chad Brown, the sources, she's going to be taking money. And I don't think she should be the favorite, but it also wouldn't surprise me. And I don't think that's crazy. Obviously is going to need some setup to get there. I do like, though, cutting back to a mile for her. And I think her kick looked a lot better on the debut. I think 1 1/8 was just a little bit too long of an ask for her. And, we talk about this sometimes where you associate closers with just wanting more distance, but you sometimes go to learn that when they have to go too far, then they can't show that same kick and they're not quite as strong. So certainly another one that'll benefit. Just the question again is she's going to have work to do. Last time she was pretty disappointing. For me, this is one, I'd use defensively in that this race is pretty open, but at the same time is one I'm probably trying to beat.
I think defensively is a very good word to use. Obviously, I think she's talented, but I think she's going to be overbet from what she's shown just already in her career. And if it's not a fast pace up front, I don't know if I want a horse at 3-1 that's going to be closing, not necessarily from the clouds, but she's not going to be close. So, and if she is close, that would really surprise me. But I don't know if 3-1's willing. I'm willing to trust that in this race over someone like Sharp Smile. If you're just getting like half a click lower on Sharp Smile, I would much rather take the 3-1 there than the 7-2 on the 2. But again, completely understand why this horse is 7-2 to connections, Munnings, Tappet, Juddmonte, Castellano. I mean, you could go on and on about this one. Definitely makes a lot of sense. But if you're playing a horizontal, I would have to say include defensively. The last horse Pat has is number 4, Volleyball Princess for Luis Linder, which is good to see him shipping back to Aqueduct, especially after this horse's win in the Ruthless. This is a much tougher field than the Ruthless was, but that 77, of course, does fit, and he's working lights out, or she's working lights out down at Parks. So this horse can find some type of trip like she did last time. She's definitely live. However, going to have to navigate a much tougher field this time. I'm going 9-8-2. Pat's going 8-9-4, and Charlie's going 1-9-2 in race number 7, the Busher, for 200,000. Guys, moving on to race number 8, and this is your feature on the days, the Grade 3 Gotham Stakes with 50 Kentucky Derby points on the line. Of course, going a 1-turn mile. Lots of 1-turn miles today, Charlie. I'll tell you that much. Course for 3-year-olds, and as I switch over, it draws a field of 10 in this race, with the morning line favorite, the pretty heavy morning line favorite at that, being the number 5, Sand Devil, the New York bred for Jose Lescano, Linda Rice. Second choice, the talented Sacrosanct for Manny Franco, Brad Cox. 3-1, John just to the inside of Sand Devil in the number 4 slot, and just to his inside, the third choice, the number 3, Calling Card, Kendrick Carmouche, Mike Maker. 6-1 is the morning line price on Calling Card. And Chuckles, my friend, you have got yourself a winner, baby. Going with the number 4, Sacrosanct. And as I switch over to the PPs right now, Charlie, The one thing that I will say is this pace does look like it could be something. It could heat up a little bit, but I've talked about it at length how Aqueduct has played recently, and if he gets the inside and the lead, this horse is very, very talented.
Oh, no, absolutely. And the reality is, yes, there's going to be some pace, but for me, if there's any horse in this field, we're talking obviously Kentucky Derby at this point. Obviously, look, it's a New York field. It's not the strongest field you're ever going to see compared to some of these other preps. That being said, if you were to ask me who in this field would I want, going forward for the Derby, I would take Sacrosanct in a heartbeat. Look, I understand maybe some of the slight concern would be that he's sort of has just repeatedly run in these mid 80s and is that all he's got, but he's off a layoff. He's working steadily, again, gets Franco and Cox, which is the duo that you want in New York at this time right now. And to me, what I also key in on, because you mentioned hot pace, is I just am impressed these last two efforts specifically with how game this horse was. I understand he's been bet down as a heavy favorite every single time, but the reality is he's never gotten an easy pace. He's never gotten easy fractions. Every single race he's been in, everybody's understood, look, he's going to try to go to the lead and take you around the track. And he hasn't been in races where the horses have just let him get away with that. I mean, obviously, two back, I guess you could argue he slightly did when he went on to win by 12. But in these last two efforts, he had horses making him work for it the whole time and had horses like Mo Plex, who's a nice horse, trying to close up to take advantage of the hot pace to get there. And it just didn't matter. So for me, I'm impressed how he's handled in the past. He'd run against some decent fields. I think he can get better off this layoff. And again, for me, a big thing I can't, because you know me, I'm not a speed horse guy at all. The big thing I don't like about them is when they can't handle adversity and when they have to take some, heat or pressure from other horses or work against anybody else, that they end up faltering in. And that's what I love about Sacrosanct so much, is even when they set big fractions and even when he has a horse making him work for the whole time, he still has gotten it done.
I mean, you want to talk about making him work the whole time. When do you see 45 flat for a half mile in the winter at Aqueduct? I mean, that is blazing fast. And with a horse breathing down, he's on the inside here as well. It would be something to say if he was on the outside, just breathing down the horse's neck. No, he's the one getting breathed on the entire way around the track. And he still ends up pulling this out, which is honestly, I thought it was an amazing effort from this horse. Does, of course, get a little leg weary at the end, but that is, of course, to be. I'm sorry, he is on the outside. My apologies. I thought he was on the inside. But either way, it doesn't matter. You see, he still kicks away with authority. You see the number 9, National Identity, trying to come up to his outside. And at this point, you think National Identity is going by. And Sacrosanct still digs in, still has
which
more
would have
left
been understandable, by the way, with the fractions.
Correct. 110 and 2, and still ends up, and you can argue the 9 hangs, whatever, but it's still a very, very visually impressive effort for me from the number 4 Sacrosanct, and I'm definitely looking forward to his races on Saturday. But of course, we have the man himself finally joining us, who gets to tell us why we're all wrong, as he has this horse nowhere in the top 3, but is going with the next likely horse in this race, probably the most likely winner in this race if you go just based on numbers alone. And for David Ramirez, says don't sleep on Linda Rice, Pat.
Good evening, guys. First off, awesome card. Hopefully got off to a nice start covering it. Yeah, Linda Rice, I was thinking about this because last year Linda had a horse that I think was in the state bred ranks that actually they ended up, bringing into open company in the bigger Kentucky Derby races. And I was blanking on the name, but Sand Devil comes in here kind of in the same spot. Ultra impressive in the state bred ranks. Obviously he's going to have to deal with a fast pace in here, but I think Lascano is going to have this horse, sitting. I would think in the pocket here, and he's going to make that early move to kind of hopefully catch the closers before this thing breaks down. But I just think Sand Devil's kind of the cream of the crop in this spot. Staying in New York in here, and listen, if this horse can win this one, and then hopefully we'll step up to the wood. But obviously needs to get by a pretty salty group in here, and obviously you guys like the 4 who is going to be right there too.
Yeah, we both like the horses in front here, which of course could be a recipe for disaster if they go 45 flat again, as they did in the last race that Sacrosanct ran in. But of course, Howard brings up a good point. Shout out to the boss man, of course. On a serious note, Sacrosanct and Sand Devil are two of the most talented New York breds, 3-year-olds that we've seen in a long time at this time of the year. So it's going to be a very fun race between these two. And Pat, they're all wondering where you're calling in from, because one guy just said a police interrogation room. So I want to know where you're at right now.
Yes, I'm actually at Meg's house. I came from a game. I got assigned a late playoff basketball game, so it was closer to Meg's house. So he said, "You know what? Why don't I take my talents to her house and do the show from here?"
So it is a police interrogation room, basically. It's just the girlfriend police, I believe, is what it's
a guest room with one lamp in it and no ceiling light. So
it's New Jersey Devils and Ohio State colors, and at least it looks cool.
There you go. Exactly right.
It's so gross on so many levels, but I won't even touch that. Pat, you and I are both going with the number 9 Garamond in second and third, respectively. I mean, I thought this horse was very reluctant to load in this race, and you could argue, it's Tampa Bay, it's Chad, Sammy Camacho, 4-5. You expect this horse to win, but the fact that Chad takes a horse from Tampa and throws him in here, I think that it's Judmont, it's Tappet, it's Uncle Mo. I mean, this horse is every making of that Chad Brown horse that no one sees at this time of year and runs off the screen at like 7-1.
Yeah, I'm really intrigued to see the progression here with this horse, considering the workouts. I haven't been able to watch one visually, but just looking at them, they're pretty good. So on paper. So if this horse can improve a little bit, which I would expect second time out, this could be a good one for Chad, who, you kind of are wondering if he's going to have a horse in, the starting gate. You got to wonder which one it's going to be. He's got to start picking up some steam with one soon.
Yeah, I mean, obviously it's going to have to be soon, because if it's not, you will not see.
You got to think most of his eggs are in the basket with Chancer, but
but where's he at this point?
Exactly.
They're putting all the eggs in one basket there. You are correct. But I think Garamond is very intriguing, to say the least, in this race. Pat, we'll talk about your last horse last. Charlie, I'll go to you first before we go there. You went Flood Zone to end off your top 3. Raylu hops aboard for Brad Cox, and a newly trained Brad Cox horse, might I add, and throws him in this race. I mean, there's so many horses. Obviously, there will be a fair amount of DFS, as we talk about all the time at this time of year. But again, very prolific move by Cox here.
Yeah, and shout out Victor Barbosa, who was the trainer. Again, I'll always sing his praises when I can. One of my favorite trainers at Gulfstream. Look, I like this one a lot on debut. Was a little bit funky, but had been working well, and was actually training with a horse who and outworking a horse who was the heavy favorite. I can't remember if that was one who ended up winning or just finished somewhere in the money. But then obviously, and I know the effort didn't come back good, but then comes back at 16-1. And I remember watching that race and just kicking myself immediately, wishing I had actually followed through a bet in it, because I thought the debut was so impressive. And then to come back against a field you could argue that looked about the same quality, if not maybe slightly better, and go off at 16-1 look crazy. And I get the fractions weren't much, and it was only at 6.5, but he won so impressively going away, sitting off the lead. Look, obviously his speed, there's a lot of other speed. There's a lot of questions. I just think this is such an interesting and aggressive move, and I'll get a square price. So I thought, why not take a chance? The horse I was actually thinking really hard about putting in third instead, who I just want to touch on very briefly, is Calling Card, who I just think is kind of one that we're all quite honestly overlooking. And kind of how you were talking about with Pat, the 9 with the Chad Brown horse is the one where you're like, does that one just end up winning? And we looked up. I think that could be Calling Card, and one where I'm kind of wondering if I should have put this one in third. Gets the blinkers on. Obviously had that ridiculous effort in New York 3-back, with that 87 winning by an absurd margin after switching from the turf. And then after that, runs into Sandman, who you guys know how strongly I feel about Sandman and hope how good he ends up being. And then goes into, the Lecompton runs against Disco Time and Built and some other tough horses.
Yeah.
I think gets some relief here, has some efforts that could certainly fit. And obviously loves New York with that, career best effort after going under the dirt. And I feel like this is the other one, gets Carmouche as well, where we could all end up looking back and being like, oh, this horse absolutely could have fit. How did none of us mention it? So I had to at least break Calling Card.
No, and I'm glad you did. The blinkers on should also help this horse, but this
and
is
should get set up.
Yeah, I mean, but the thing that I looked at, Charlie, is that I just don't know. Like, this horse ran in State Company 3 times, had that blistering effort. And then obviously I know Sandman, obviously at Oaklawn Park, Disco Time, Built, all this type of stuff in the Lecompton, which was very tough. But he hasn't really shown anything really since that 87 last race. So for a horse that's projected to be third choice in a race like this is where I'm willing to at least, or third or fourth choice, take a step back and basically play the I need to see it card before I bet this horse at single digit odds at least. So that's one thing that I just want to point out about Colin Cabrera, but I'm very glad that you brought him up. Normandy Coast, Jim Pillar's brought up in the chat, thinks this horse could be interesting. Another one shipping here, which has been working out of Fairgrounds the whole time. Obviously, they're trying to steer clear as Fairgrounds looks very, very deep in their fields, especially, God, I can only imagine what the Louisiana Derby is going to be. But last horse we'll talk about here, Pat, is the number 8, McPhee. And for those of you who don't know about McPhee, if you go here to the dam side, you see 111. And where the hell does that come from? This horse is a half-tooth, of course, Torpedo Anna. So, of course, as the Torpedo Anna fan, Pat, I'm sure you had to throw this horse in here somewhere.
Yeah, and I think maybe could be, closing to this pace. I'm not sure where they're going to put this horse. Dutcher usually likes to have his horse more forwardly placed, but this horse seems to show to be a closer, obviously, from previous races, especially breaking the maiden. So, I listen, this is kind of my wise guy horse in here. I don't know how this horse is really going to run, but I don't know. Things seem to get interesting at Aqueduct this time of year.
That's an understatement, but yeah.
Yeah. So this is going to be my horse that, like I always like to say, is and usually my best bets is like a tri-key type of horse. So I think McAfee, if the pace does go like 45, you said, Kyle, to the half, maybe this is the horse that can close in.
I'll tell you what, Pat. I think you definitely have to use him. He's gonna be over. He's got to be overbet. I mean,
yeah,
for what he's done so far in his career. Granted, obviously, you could argue it's more than what Garamond has done. He could be overbet too for what he is right now. But you got to imagine that this horse is going to be talked about from now until probably Saturday, 1 minute to post time, or until he's in the gate. And obviously, they could still be talking about him afterwards, but. Being that he's half the Torpedo Anna, this horse is going to be overbet, but is an absolute and you have to use him. But in terms of where I think at his career right now, if he's going off at single-digit odds, that's, again, another one where I'm going to have to say, I'll see it, and if I see it first, maybe we'll have to reevaluate when it comes, the Woodward. But we'll pay attention to that, of course, when we get there, guys. But the Gotham should be a very, very fun race and very competitive as well. I'm going 4-9-5. Pat's going 5-8-9. Charlie's going 4-5-7. Guys, let's finish up this late pick 5, starting with race number 9, a state bred optional claiming N2X going. Shocker, guys, another 1-turn mile on the dirt. This is the 1-turn mile fest, draws a field of technically 11, but only 10 entries. My views on that are, of course, reserved to the man, Paul Halloran. If you haven't watched those rants, you really should, because they're fantastic. The morning line favorite, guys, is the number 8, Quick to Accuse. Manny Franco bet Brad Cox at 2-1. Second choice is that coupled entry, but they're actually going out of gates 2 and 3, both trained by Jamie Ness and both at 4-1, of course. And the number 4, Landoro for Marat and Clement at 5-1 is your third choice. And guys, I'll switch over the picks right now. Pat, like where your head is thinking here with Landoro. Charlie, you are going with the morning line favorite, the number 8, Quick to Accuse. So, of course, I will have you go first. What would you like most about this Brad Cox runner here?
Yeah, and this was the only horse actually in all 6 races we covered where I ended up going with a morning line favorite. Just kind of speaks to how open these races could be. But look, another common theme you'll see is another horse where it's Brad Cox and Manny Franco. I'll keep saying it over and over again. These are just the trainer jockey combo that you kind of want to be having at this time of year in New York. And look, obviously in for the claim now, but has so many numbers that fit in this field. He's going to be forwardly placed in a good spot. I know obviously last time went off as the favorite and was, pretty disappointed at that 6.5. But I also just thought that was kind of, to me, again, I'm never going to, act like I'm smarter when it comes to where to put a horse than Brad Cox. But I also feel like when I've watched, this horse looks better going 7 or a mile. I just thought 6.5 was too short. And I guess it kind of was shown with what the actual upper was because, just was not forwardly placed at all. Naturally, going against horses, they're going to be faster and didn't really show an ability to close. And I just don't think that's the game for Quick to Accuse. I think it's either being on the lead or within 2 or 3 lengths at all times, not really trying to sit, 5th or 6th place back. Now gets back to the spot. I think the pace scenario should be fine for this one. Obviously, there's going to be speed, but I don't think Quick to Accuse is going to be on the lead. I'm looking at my own PPs right now, so I guess I should. Yeah, and I would say now I should look so I can actually see the time for him. But yeah, I was going to say I would guess this one would be sitting right off the speed. Obviously, hopefully not 3 wide the whole time, but this one could sit 2 wide and sit just off the speed. I think Quick to Accuse could be in a pretty good spot.
I mean, yeah, I think if he runs anything back to like 2 back in this race, I think he's definitely a use on the win end. Pat, you have this horse in 3rd. I have the horse in 2nd. Obviously, the horse is live, but anything more you want to add about Quick to Accuse before we move on to our top pick?
No, yeah, I just this is more trying to find value in this spot. I'm not.
Yeah.
Listen, the horse could very easily win in here. I'm not, if I, playing a more horizontally speaking, I would definitely have this horse on my tickets. But I'm going to try and find a little bit of a price in here, and that's where we kind of land with the 4.
And I'll tell you what, Pat, the one thing to definitely say about Quick to Accuse is he's been running an open company and open N1Xs. Obviously comes back to state bred here, which theoretically should be an easier spot. But I have a very interesting angle, at least in this race, with Quick to Accuse and our top pick, Landoro. Probably one of the lightest raced horses in this race, being that this horse only has 7 lifetime starts, 6 of them at Aqueduct, and 5 of 6 in the money. Runs his best race every single time, and if the pace does heat up, Pat, he's definitely going to be one of those running late.
Yeah, I love the consistency here. I'm hoping this horse can just stick to what this horse likes to do at Aqueduct, like you said, Kyle. At the end of the day, probably will need a little bit of pace to run into in here, but the Clements have always been, very well second off the layoff, and 5-1. If we can get that, you could put this on my best bet ticket, as I don't have this horse, but I really do think this horse is going to hit the board, and if not, hopefully show up and run a big race in here to kind of, for a barn that, the Clements, listening to, Miguel Clement, I know he talked on that the video that we got to watch, just the consistency that they show, talking about Pandagate, who's another New York bred horse, how that, and they're not trying to do too much with their horses, and they know where to place their horses. I think Landoro is one of those where you can kind of see this horse start to bloom as a 4-year-old. So who's to say this horse can't start taking bigger jumps?
I mean, yeah, I'll show the time form, because the time form is actually what I looked at in this race. We talk about the differing time form and buyer standpoint. The 8 in this race does have a 117 time form. That was 2 back in that race that I mentioned. But all the other races, 109, 108, 103, 102, nothing else has gotten to that 117. Go to Landoro. Landoro has been 98, 97, 100, now 106. Takes that jump up. It's better than Quick to Accuse's average race. And if Quick to Accuse doesn't fire his absolute best effort, I really like Landoro in this spot. Like I said, lightly raced, improving now, 4-year-old, continued. And again, like you said, Clement is always, I always thought of Clement knowing where he likes to put his horses, and he doesn't put his horses somewhere where they can't win. I think keeping him at the state bred level, this N2X is exactly where this horse wants to be, going this 1-turn mile, which I think you look at the 2 races that really muddied up the form, except for his debut. They're both 7 furlongs. You go back to that mile distance, he's always running his best effort, especially with a quick pace in front of him. So I definitely love Landoro on top in this spot. Guys, I have the coupled entry in there. I actually like the 1A as opposed to the 1 from a pace scenario standpoint. But I completely understand why you guys don't have these horses in there. Ruben Silveira hops aboard this horse. This is one that is going to take advantage of that pace scenario. So Silveira gets a good spot breaking from what is the 3 post. I think this horse is absolutely needed. And if you guys don't like the coupled entry, at least use him defensively in some way, because if this pace does melt down, Hagrid's Flame, for all you Harry Potter fans, I've never honestly. People are going to be mad at me. I've never watched or read a single minute of it in my life. But this one will be running late in this one. Pat, end off our conversation here. And then Charlie, of course. Actually, I'll have Charlie end it off. But Pat, real quick, lots of trouble. The Pletcher horse, who won at claiming, hasn't really shown too much in the in this type of in this campaign off the layoff last October. But if he runs back to that claiming race, he could absolutely fit in here.
Yeah, that was a fast pace, but that visually that was pretty impressive to me. I don't know. I think there could be something there. This is another one of those races where I just think, obviously we like the 4 or 5 to 1. You talked about the coupled entry, Kyle. And I'm against the 8, so I was like, well, why not try and find another horse in here at a price? And I think Kendrick's always interesting because you kind of he ends up doing the opposite of what you expect him to do, and sometimes you're on the right side of that. So I'm hoping in here, obviously the way Todd's been going pretty well, of late. What's to say he hasn't been for a long time now, but I don't know. I think this horse could take another step and revert back to that 80 that obviously was not there last time out, and just kind of a weird effort.
Yeah, I know. He's kind of he either runs his effort or he doesn't. But if he runs his effort, especially with a quick pace in front of him, which I think obviously is where he does his best running with both of his 2 of the 3 of his wins, definitely could be one running late, maybe even a reverse tri-key type little beat. We will see. But of course, we will see come Saturday. Charlie, real quick, you have Mighty Atlas in second. For Michael Maselli and Jose Lascano. Lascano's also been having a very good meet. What'd you like about Mighty Atlas to round out your exacta here?
Yeah, the other guy that you certainly want to have and getting a little more fair value. I kind of think with the strategy I went with my top 3 was go with the most upside horse and the 4 and have that mixed in what is clearly a spread race. We'd all agree. And then just go with the 2 horses who, based off of figures wise, are the horses to beat. And I think that's kind of the reality with Mighty Atlas. Probably not going to be quite as forward as the 8, but I would guess probably another length behind, but still pretty close. And I mean, you could argue Mighty Atlas has the best resume, and you could argue, peak form is the horse to be. I mean, there are plenty of high 80s here and even a 90 that would easily fit in the spot. But then, obviously was off the claim for Maker, which normally is not a great thing because Maker's very good about knowing when to move on from his horses. And then since then did drop, 2 duds, which are a little bit concerning, but kind of just banking on that he's working decently and that, if he does get back to those, high 80s that we saw a few efforts back, he could fit. But certainly the question is, last 2 efforts have been really bad, but does get Lascano aboard again. So maybe there's still something left in the tank.
And being the price is going to be 8 to 1 or higher. And we mentioned that time for Mighty Alice has a 117 ran as well. If he can revert back to last, spring, maybe early summer form, horse definitely fits. Again, just going to have to find it after running 2 duds the last couple times out. I'm going 4-8-1A. Pat's going 4-6-8. Charlie's going 8-7-4 in the penultimate leg of the pick 5. Let's move on to the last of the pick 5 guys in this race. This race is also pretty tough. It's a maiden special, 6 furlongs for 3 years old, foaled in New York State. And as I bring up the picks right now, actually, I bring up the Equibase right now, excuse me, and I'll bring up our picks to couple that. Pat is going with the morning line favorite, the number 1, Vikinda for Manny Franco and George Weaver at 5-2. Second choice, the number 9, Share the Loot for, I think it's Chris Elliott. I don't know. I apologize. And Melanie Giddings, Jesus Christ, at 4-1. And third choice, number 6, America's Back for Luan Machado and Mike Maker at 9-2. You can see Charlie and I are going with the number 6, America's Back. As I mentioned, Pat, you are going with the number 1, the morning line favorite out of Vacoma. And the thing is that this is one of those horses, Pat, that can get a little frustrating at times. That seems like he gets the job done and never can do it. But of course, makes a whole ton of sense. Just gonna have to put it together on the win end.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, talk about seconditis. It's getting, this horse is going to have to break through at some point. I'm hoping to be on the right end of the stick here. it's been one of those situations where the horse has found a way to lose in all different fashions.
Yeah.
And you will see three back actually faced Sand Devil in there.
Hmm.
Was never a threat to Sand Devil, but at the end of the day, I'm just gonna. I think this horse obviously will have the rail. I think we'll appreciate that. Should be forwardly placed, and maybe can try and go gate to wire in here. And if this horse doesn't break his maiden in this spot, I wonder when this horse will.
Well, when and maybe not, maybe never at this point. But obviously, Vakinda's very talented. He's running against some pretty nice horses as well. Pat mentioned Sand Devil beat Prince Valiant by 7 lengths in that race, and then Prince Valiant came back to beat him by a neck in the next race. Skytown, I believe, is an Adelphi horse, if I'm not mistaken. So obviously, very talented runners. Again, just gonna have to put it together on the win end. But Charlie, I know you and I are probably gonna agree on the same thing. Taking this horse on the win end at 5-2 was definitely a no-go for me. You have to include him somewhere in the mix because he's going to run his race. But you and I both landed on the same horse. America's Back actually came out of that race that Vakinda ran in last time out. Was kind of in between horses down the lane, kind of flattened out a little bit here. Comes back, but I think second time out, probably learned a lot in that first race. Mike Makers stay with him. Has one work back, a little bit of a maintenance work, but should be ready for this spot.
Yeah, and look, obviously the one has faced the best horses. The one is probably the most talented horse in this field and has efforts that fit and beat the 6. But the reality, like you touched on and Patrick did too, the one is kind of bizarre in that you don't really know where this horse is going to run from. You just know that the horse is going to be close and give his best effort, but just hasn't gotten it done. So for me, I'm not taking that at 5-2. Obviously, horizontally, I'd use the horse, but vertically, no way I'm putting that horse on top. I'm going to look for upside. And look, America's Back. Obviously, ran decent in that race, was off the pace, showed some interest to close originally, and then sort of flattened out. And I kind of envision, just as time form showing, a similar trip as last time, probably sitting a little bit off, maybe a length behind the one, and then we'll just see if this time the horse doesn't flatten out and has, more ability turning home. But Is for Maker gets Luan Machado aboard as well. Was 380 grand, so clearly a horse that's well meant and that they have big intentions for down the line. And you can add on, Kyle, but for me, this was strictly an upside pick. Again, I'm a big Michael Maker guy. The horse was working for the last time and, was a middling price, and I thought ran like a middling price. But I just think has plenty of upside to step forward. And I just rather have 9-2 on a Maker with Machado, who has the second time out and a chance to step forward, than go with a horse who hasn't necessarily had a bad effort, but just continuously doesn't get it done. It is, 5-2.
I mean, you hit right on it. I mean, you're getting double the price at least on America's Back as opposed to the one. And while the one might be the best, you just don't. I mean, exactly what that horse is by now. America's Back has a lot of upside. Ran a 64 in debut. Can take the biggest step forward in what could be the biggest step forward of this rate of his career. And generally speaking, the second time out is the place to take that step forward. So I'm landing on the number 6. America's Back in a pretty tough main race to end this sequence. But guys, we'll go through the field real quick and then we'll get right to best bets. The number 5, Toga Dan Pat, is a horse you have in there. For those that don't know Koa, he's very, very good at Finger Lakes. If I'm not mistaken, he is the top rider over at Finger Lakes in New York. So definitely don't shy away just because you have Koa riding on here. Jorge Abreu has this horse here as well. So definitely could be live, but the board will obviously be the biggest tell.
Yeah, Jim Pilar's put it up in the chat too, I believe.
Missed that.
Toga Dan,
there you go.
Abreu's actually small sample size. It was only like 12 horses within the last 5 years, but it's been pretty decent with state bred maidens, at least hitting the board percentage wise. So I think this horse could be a little interesting. Obviously, watch the board here because if this horse is not getting bet, then that'll be the telltale sign. But yeah, I think in a race like this, you guys have the 6, very logical. But I think there's a couple in here that the 9 and the 11 too, that are all take a step forward or break their maiden and show us what they can do first out.
Yeah, and Charlie, obviously, let's talk about this first time starter from the outside, 15-1. Horse that's been working forwardly over at Belmont on the training track for Jimmy Ferraro, who hasn't had, of course, 1 for 28, not the best meets, but smaller barn. Obviously, Lascano hops aboard, so this horse should be at least a little bit live.
Yeah, and I'll briefly also touch on the 9 after with you, Kyle, just because it's a Gulfstream
Okay.
horse. But yeah, with the 11, I just wanted a price in third. I feel like the 1 and 6 are the most logicals, and it's a pretty open race. So I wanted my third horse to be one I know I get a price on. So yeah, I went for smaller connections with a smaller barn, but I keyed in on that 47 and 1 work, a horse who's working forwardly, and then again, Lascano choosing to hop on for this one. Again, he's one of the best jockeys here and go into a smaller barn. So to me, that kind of tells me that the 11 there might actually be something there. Obviously, with horses like these, you got to wait until you actually see the board and see what kind of money's being taken. But again, I feel like with the Bullet Works and with Lascano aboard, there at least is something there with this horse. And for a race that, even with it likely being 1 or 6, is still pretty damn open, I certainly wouldn't be shy in throwing this one in on a ticket.
I mean, if any race is in here, obviously this is one of the 2 I think you definitely need to spread in. The number 12 has been getting some talk in the chat from Terry, Frank, and Jim Pillars saying the 12 shipping. And of course, race 9, 5, 12 Diormano will be a big price from the outside post. Melanie Giddings just seems like she's trying to find a place for this horse. This is almost a completely fresh look from this horse, 4 months ago at this point. First time gelding, the ultimate equipment change. First time blinkers, gets Lasix again as the last time, but will be a big price, which I think is where you can trust him. But it's going to be a tough spot to see if he can run back to what he's done. The number 9, Share the Loot, other one from Melanie Giddings, actually owned by Melanie in this race. Ran a really good race 2 back at Gulfstream Park. Probably, you could argue, an easier spot. This horse was also the even money favorite, just lost by half a length, and Harley hasn't been within 2 1/4 of the other 3 races, and they get a lot farther than 2 1/4 in the other ones. Obviously, pretty tough races. Losing to a horse called Tappan Street, which is of course a very talented runner for Brad Cox, and Bold Fortune in the New York Breeders' Futurity, which is not an easy race either over at Finger Lakes. So Share the Loot, I think, is definitely one to look for. It's just a really tough race, guys. Trying to pick hairs, obviously, between these New York breds, but there's so many different ways you can go. And obviously the board will be your biggest tell in any type of race like this. But unfortunately, they always put these types of races at the end of your pick 5 sequence. So of course, if you're playing vertically, you have the ability to watch the board. If not, if you're playing delay pick 5, pick 4, pick 3, you guys will not have the ability to look at the board. But this is definitely going to be a very tough race, and it's interesting to see who comes out of it on top. I'm going 6-1-9. Pat's going 1-5-6, and Charlie's going 6-1-11. Stephanie, good to see you here as always, and definitely, and they agree with me that it's a tough race to close out the late pick 5. But guys, we'll move on to best bets here. But of course, before that, if you guys are enjoying the content over here, please, or if you're watching live or watching a replay, please go down below the video player, hit the like button. If you're enjoying the content, please hit the subscribe button. We would greatly appreciate it. Completely free to do, and it's the best way to help out our channel. Guys, let's move on to best bets. Pat, I'll let you go first. Horse you didn't get to talk about, but interested to hear what you liked about them. The number 8, She's Fascinating, a win in race number 7. And in races we did get to talk about, which in just that one, you have a double stemming from race number 9. It's the number 4, Landoro, that you and I liked on top, and Lots of Trouble, who's the Pletcher horse you had in there, and singling the number 1, Vakinda in the last.
Yeah, I think She's Fascinating. Can take another jump for Tony Dutrow. I think we had 77 buyer last time, and just was a big jump. And sometimes you get concerned about that, but that was a pretty visually impressive race to me. So I'm going to give her another chance to hopefully garner a couple more points for the Oaks in a race that I do think is obviously wide open, and it's a race that has a lot of horses that kind of need to take another step to have any chance to get into that starting gate. So I'm hoping can chip in and do well. And then race 9, I'm going to play a double with 2 mid to decent prices into the 1 in the last for Weaver, who needs to break his maiden sometime soon. But this is a great card on Saturday, and it's a great card across the country. So it's going to be a fun day of racing, and looking forward to it.
Yeah, it's a fantastic day on Saturday. If you guys, again, have not checked out our other podcasts after this one, go watch early or in the week for Santa Anita. They're covering, the boys covered Big Cap Day on Tuesday, and on Wednesday, Picks and Ponies with Howard, Pete, and Paul covered Fountain of Youth Day. So after this podcast, feel free to go watch our other ones for a massive weekend of racing. Pat, good luck with your best bets, and I really did like She's fascinating as well in that race. So I'm interested to see how that horse runs. Charlie, let you go next. Race number 6, a double singling. I don't even need to look at who that is. That is the number 3, Yo Daddy, and race number 7, going by 2 in the number 1, Liam in the Dust, who you had on top, and the number 9, Sharp Smile. And in race number 8, could even play this as a pick 3, maybe, Charlie, or something like that. Win on the number 4 in the Gotham Sacrosanct.
Yeah, you were, taking the words out of my mouth, what I was going to hint at. We talked about how the last 2 races in this late pick 5 were spread races and how difficult they could be. And a really easy way to solve that, if you see 2 spread races that you don't feel strong about, is rather than throwing money down the drain. Something we've talked about, Kyle. It's a big reason why we give out best bets instead of having to manage, make us give out a pick 5 every time, is we can key in on what we like. And for me, I think, and you can speak on to Kyle, it seems like our opinions are pretty similar, not just in horses, but which races we like. That these first 3 races are the easier ones. And so for me, I'm going to play a double of Yo Daddy, who we talked extensively about. And so Liam in the Dust mainly is the one I'm keying in on, especially because with that 9-2 and the price I'll get, and a horse who could, I believe, come back strong and wire that field with her, could work out well. But then also using the 9, who, we kind of talked about, you have on top, Kyle, could very well just be the horse to beat. And then, going in Sacrosanct, going with the second choice, the other horse out of the 2, obviously the other one being Sand Devil, who's going to take a lot of money. And again, as a horse I really like and is proven to be game, and the hot pace doesn't scare me. And I could very realistically see myself playing a pick 3 mainly around these, and maybe play some sort of, smaller backup, or maybe I end up finishing in the last leg with Sand Devil instead, just as a little hedge, or someone else in the race that I feel about. And obviously you do notice I don't have that 2 in the double in the race before that, Chad Brown, who I touched on. With a pick 5 is a horse I'd use defensively, but in doubles is, again, one I wouldn't use because I'm trying to beat.
Yeah, I mean, look, you know how much I share of those, of every single opinion you just talked about. So, Charlie, if you have a good day, I'm gonna have a good day. Let's just say that. And how you get around that, Charlie, what you talked about with tough races, just take 2 win bets and say if they run, they run. My irresponsible wager of the week, as I touched on, guys, race number 6, as that's a host fail. My apologies. Race number 6, a win on the number 3, Yo Daddy. I talked about at length how much I like that horse on top. And race number 9, Pat and I's top pick, number 4, Landoro, should get a very good trip with a horse who's steadily improving and always put in the right spot and always runs his race. So win on Yo Daddy, win on Landoro, take it to the bank. Hopefully we can cash 2 races. If all you cash is 2 races and it's those 2, I will be perfectly fine on the day. But everybody, thank you guys all so much for watching. We greatly appreciate all the support you guys give us and continue to show us throughout the entirety of the Derby prep season. But of course, we have this show every single Wednesday, usually at 8 p.m. Eastern. So feel free to come by and join us every single Wednesday, but come by every single Tuesday at 9:30 for Pacific Horseplayers, Wednesday at 8 for us, and Thursday at 8 p.m. Eastern for Picks and Ponies with Howard, Pete, and Paul, as we continue to cover, again, Kentucky Derby season here on the HHH Racing Podcast. And for my co-hosts, Charlie Freeman, and the referee late edition, Patrick Kunsel, this has been your host, Kyle Roscoe, in episode 121 of Bettin N Boozin here on the HHH Racing Podcast, covering Gotham Stakes Day, Kentucky Derby points on the line for Saturday, March 1st. And until next time, everybody, crush those bets, win those photos, and stay safe, everyone. We'll see you in the next one. Have a good night.